Let's talk about why people feel like they're speaking death on...
Why do people want to avoid this?
That statement? Yeah.
It's uncomfortable. I think talking about planning for death makes people consider all of the things they did not do, they did not achieve. Some people feel like everything has to be perfect before they can do the plan. I have to be a millionaire first, when really it's just the opposite. Culturally, I think that it comes from a faith-based perspective. There's life and death in the power of your tongue. But if we're talking about a faith-based perspective, we also know that Proverbs says that a wise man plans for his children's children. We know that God takes legacy seriously. If I was a Bible scholar, I'd rattle off a few more verses.
Take that, Granny. There you go, Granny. Here you go. This is what the Bible says right there. All right, y'all. Welcome back to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. I'm your host, Dr. Nee, joined by Dr. Renee.
Hey.
And we are lawyered up today. Hey. We got Savaun Perry. So, I always ask lawyers, like, are you supposed to say, like, Esquire at the end, or Savaun Perry, like, attorney at law, or...
I think it depends on the setting. Yeah, it just depends on the setting. I think when I'm among friends and peers, I'm just Savaun. When I'm with my clients, I always refer to them as Mr. or Mrs. or Doctor or whoever. And depending on their age, they may call me Savaun or... Attorney Perry. If I'm teaching, they call me Attorney Perry. And when I'm in the academia, they call me Dean Perry. So it just kind of depends.
I didn't even know that, really. So when you're like...
You didn't do your research.
That wasn't in How to Get Away with Murder? So wait, when you're in a professor setting, you have to say Dean Perry?
Well, you don't have to. And also I work at a HBCU law school, so they tend to be a little bit more formal. But my title at the law school is, I'm an assistant dean, so they will say Dean. We will refer to each other as dean or professor in that academic setting.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, let's jump right into this because, listen, like there's a lot of folks who are listening to this show and they're like, look, I'm first generation X, Y, and Z, and I got a bunch of student loans and I'm about to be making some money, 6 figures. And now people talking to me about estate planning and how I'm going to bequeath my money to somebody. And I just got money. Why I got to worry about that? Why is that important? So let's start off with, what is estate planning, Savaun? Please tell us what that is.
Sure. So estate planning could mean a variety of things to many people, but in general, I like to say estate plans do 3 things, right? Number 1, estate planning protects your health. Everybody thinks estate planning is essentially who gets what when I die. But they don't.
That's what I think of.
Yes.
That's what the TV show Succession.
Exactly. But a comprehensive estate plan includes legal documents that protect you in the event of a medical emergency and you are not able to articulate your healthcare decisions for yourself. So it protects your health, while you are alive. You also want to make sure that the person you want is legally empowered to make those healthcare decisions for you, right? If you got a divorce, but your ex-wife is still your power of attorney or your healthcare power of attorney, and you didn't change that, then baby, that's who's making your healthcare decisions for you, right?
Stop playing. Are you serious? So even your wife that you're married to, if your ex-wife is your POA, she supersedes your wife?
Well, I will say it depends, but we've created a problem that we don't need. You have appointed a healthcare power of attorney. You have legally empowered somebody to make decisions about your health, especially in the event if you cannot articulate those decisions or advocate for yourself. And if it is valid and that person produces the healthcare power of attorney, now we have a layered situation that otherwise could have been avoided with comprehensive planning, right? So
I need that Social Security, keep him alive, or I need that inheritance, pull the plug.
Right. So we have estate plan number 1 protects your health, and estate plan number 2 protects your coins, protects your wealth, protects your hustle, because we are in hustle grind culture. Well, I don't know. Culture's kind of moving into more soft life. I really don't know where we are right now.
I don't know where we are either.
But post-COVID is like, listen, like I got to get my health together and I can't be beholden to a company and stuff. So I think that the hustle culture is kind of, that fell by the wayside.
Yeah, I'm not sure where we are, but the point is there's money coming in from somewhere, hopefully. And again, in the event that you are not able to manage your your business, fulfill contractual obligations, orders. I don't know what kind of business people do. Manage your bank accounts, pay your mortgage, negotiate with credit card companies for forbearance or additional time. If you are in a situation where you cannot do those things for yourself, who is legally appointed to manage your affairs for you until you get better or until you get back into the country or, whatever your specific circumstance is. So estate plans protect your health, they protect your wealth. And then last but not least, comprehensive estate plan protects the people that you love the most and the things that you've worked so hard to acquire. And then that's where that piece comes in. Who takes care of your children if something happens to you, right? How do they access that money if something happens to you? And who gets what after you die? Because just because you don't create a plan does not mean there is no plan, right? There's a plan. But it's
in somebody's head.
There's a ground, Monty. There's a ground.
There's a plan, but it's your state's plan. So that could be the state of North Carolina. That could be the state of Maryland. That could be the state of Virginia. Wherever you are, there's a plan, right? But it may not be your plan. So that's what I like to say.
Okay, because everybody's always talks about that. Like, the state has a plan and then you should have a plan so you don't have to go to state. Like, what's the big issue? Like, why is having the state decide what the plan is? Why is it such a bad thing? Tell us about that.
Sure. So there could be a variety of reasons. The state has a plan and it's typically called intestate succession. It depends where you live, how they follow those rules. So some of those rules, for example, in some states may be if a husband and wife, if one of the spouses passes away with no children, then the surviving spouse has to share assets with the deceased spouse's parents, right? That may not be the plan.
Wait, say that again?
Say
that again?
I'm just giving you an example of a state. I think it's California. Don't hold me to it. And other states may be like this. Meaning...
I thought she was about to say Jersey. She was like, yeah, it's not
well, I don't know. But basically what it means is they have a plan for how your assets should be distributed when you pass away. So I was just giving an example. In some states or locations, they require you to split the assets between the surviving spouse and then the person who passed away, their parents. We know we live in an age where relationships may be complicated. They could be nuanced. And the person who passed away would have never wanted their assets split or distributed between their spouse who survived them and their parents. So that's an example of a plan you may not want. In addition, the plan, which typically happens during a probate process, may also involve additional costs, right? Because it's not for free. The state doesn't probate your assets for free. They may take a percentage of it, filing fees. And then after you've tried to do it on your own for a year or two, then you call somebody like me and I tell you, baby, we don't do that for free. Okay.
Right.
Wait, you said after a year or two?
Yeah.
It could be that long with the state?
It can be longer because remember, the person who's going through the process is usually grieving, is usually grief-stricken, is usually overwhelmed.
So a lot of things are delayed.
There's a lot, so they usually don't do it right away. And then they realize, I should have been doing this. Now I can't deed the home over into my name or deed a car or title a car or transfer the assets because you have to go through that legal process. A story that I share often is, and I have her permission, is I received a call from a lady whose sister passed away. And the sister passed away leaving 3 children behind. But the sister was a homeowner. So there's the pro. But of course, in the middle of everything, some people don't even know that you have to do stuff when somebody dies.
Right.
She didn't do that, right? She has her own children, her own family. She has 3 more children. So who's paying deceased sister's mortgage during that process? Nobody. Nobody's paying deceased sister's mortgage. As a result, what happens to that house?
Foreclosure.
That is generational wealth that her children will never have access to. Imagine the difference if a surviving sister could have sold that home. If she had been legally appointed, had been the executor, had the paperwork already set up, if she was able to sell that home, imagine what that 150, 200K equity, whatever it was, the difference that could have made in the lives of the children who lost their mom. And that's generational.
That's definitely sobering.
Lost forever.
Yeah.
So let me, wow, that right there is, I always think about what happens to the children, like what actually happens to the children, right? But I never actually thought about, well, what happens to the house in that case? Like, well, yeah, that's true. Nobody is paying the mortgage.
No.
Like, how often are you seeing people actually kind of come to you thinking about these things? Like, why do people come to you to talk about estate planning? Like, what's the trigger?
Okay, so there was a time where I used to post about it a whole lot, right? And somebody would see my video or see somebody else's video, because we also have a lot of, and I mean this respectfully or disrespectfully, I don't know. We also have a lot of
let's do it with disrespect.
Yeah, let's do
with a lot of disrespect.
We got a lot of internet gurus who have not sat for nobody's bar exam.
Right. Thank you.
Talking about,
oh my,
trust this, trust that, do this, and then they call me with some really complicated scheme that doesn't make sense for the average person because they've seen it. But these are but in a sense, thank you, internet gurus, because you've at least sparked the conversation. And these people are seeking some counseling or some direction. And so that sparks it. What also really sparks it is somebody who has been responsible for the probate or wrapping up the matters of somebody they loved who's passed away, and that person didn't have a plan. And they went through the stress of court. They went through the years of the probate process. They went through their family bickering, because sometimes when people pass away, they're people who never speak to each other again. And they are just determined to not
they'll never happen to them.
That legacy for their children behind.
Yeah.
So, I do trauma surgery. So I see a lot of people who are really close to death, or like elderly people who are, they're living either in nursing homes or they're living in assisted living, or they're at home, and, the granny falls, breaks the hip, or has a serious head injury, and there's no, POA, right?
Power of
attorney there. And, oftentimes, like, nobody can make a decision as to, should we keep her on the ventilator? Would she want a tracheostomy? Or, like, there's so many difficult decisions of not having estate planning that not only just affects, that family and what to do next, but even just, like, in general, the healthcare, and then in general, what I can do and what I can bring up and stuff. So, that stuff, after a while, I got to the point where I was like, let me ask my parents, like, do you have one? Right?
Yes.
And they used to always say, we have a will. We have a will.
Same, yes.
Yeah. And then finally I was like, you know what? I'm taking over. And we got an estate plan.
Yay.
And actually we were primed first by Renee. Renee did it for her family.
Yay.
And I was like, you know what? We need to do that also. Because I've seen some bad arguments, right? Like, I've seen people, like,
you see people
everything that
argue
you mentioned,
when they're alive.
everything
it's
that you
like,
mentioned.
How do you think this is going to end?
I've seen people, like, are married and they are estranged, and they've been estranged for several years.
Yes.
And they are dating someone or in a serious relationship with somebody else. And now they can't make a decision for themselves. And here comes a estranged spouse saying,
See?
I'm making the decisions and X, Y, and Z. And they probably screwed me over about X, Y, and Z, so we doing this.
Yeah.
Or
that's mine. It's
bad, or, would Granny have wanted a trach and nobody wants to make a decision?
Yeah.
But then you find out, like, there's some secondary gain to those things, right? Like, it is a very scary thing to not have that piece of paper as a medical practitioner for certain types of patients. So that's why I was like, I got to get it done. And it wasn't painful. It was like, it took, like, I think about a good 5 to 6 months once we got everything kind of taken in.
Yeah.
So my next question for you then is, how soon should you start this? So for someone who's just finishing residency, they have no kids, but they got a ton of student loan debt.
On average, early 30s.
They're about to be making six figures. Is this someone who should be worried about estate planning?
Yes.
Really?
Yes, because no man knows their time or place, right?
Probate wants to deal with student loans?
Well, you know, when you passed away, don't consolidate.
It dies, right?
If you're a married couple, don't consolidate them, because then you leaving it to live on. Don't put them together. But side note, yes, because
that's a big deal, though. I'm glad you dropped that.
Yes, again, because in my opinion, again, this is just me. Estate plans do three things: health, wealth, and then assets and the people that you love. And for the exact reasons that you brought up, something can happen to someone at any time. And although they may have a lot of debt, right, they still may have some money in the bank. Who gets it? Who gets access to it? They still may have an apartment. Who can go into your apartment and clean it out or make those?
When I finish residency, I have like $25 to my name, Savaun.
Maybe.
Who gonna get that $25?
Yo, look under my bed. I got $500.
But we're talking about if somebody passes away. But what if they don't pass away? What if they just have a medical situation that is a long-term medical situation?
Right. And they're in a vegetative state.
Exactly. What if they are in a persistent vegetative state and they can't make any decisions? Again, and the example that you brought up, right? Family bickering, who's in charge. If you are the type of person who is going to want your pastor and your brothers and sisters praying and candles in the room all the time, and then the person in charge is like, no visitors, nobody come in, keep it quiet, this and that, this and that. That may impede your progress, because that is not the type of healing and restoration that you would have wanted. Conversely, if you are a very private person and the person's in charge is taking pictures of you and posting on Instagram, YouTubes and stuff, and say, pray for my brother or sister, and they doing
starting a GoFundMe,
right? They doing TikTok,
doing the dances
in the room,
right?
And
pray for me,
and you in that vegetative state, and you are hearing all of this, and you're like, right? They keep editing it. That I don't know what that might do to your body, but that might stress you all the way.
Yes,
Savaun, you speaking from experience?
Yeah,
not my personal experience, but I have the experience of so many people, and that's why I'm conveying the importance. So yes, even a younger person, right? A younger person who's in school, mom or dad can't just call your school and say, let me see your grades, or let me make decisions for you, or let me manage your financial aid disbursement. No, but if mom or dad have a POA, they can, right? So they are 18, they're an adult, right? We don't want
listening. Don't get your parents a POA if you in college.
Absolutely.
I'm just saying.
This is my edutainment only.
You make sure you go to your classes, y'all. They're going to find out.
In the event that you have a healthy relationship, absolutely, because we know young people get luck struck and they start making crazy decisions. And next thing you know, something's happened to your child. Your child laid up somewhere and you may not know about it, and boyfriend or girlfriend is somewhere making all these decisions about your child. So I mean,
on the real, like Savaun, are you saying like for those, like for like family or parents who have a healthy relationship with their kids, if their kids are going off to college or going off to professional school, that they should advocate to be POAs?
Things happen to young adults in college all the time.
I didn't even think about that.
Medical emergencies happen to them. Crimes, they might be victims of crimes. I mean, think about it. Sometimes people get incarcerated and they still have things on the outside. Who can manage those things? So things, all kinds. That's why I say it's a comprehensive estate plan. Anything can happen to anybody at any time. And you want to make sure the people who you trust are empowered to look out for your best interests, in the event that something happens. Now, this is a very personal decision because you are giving somebody a lot of power depending on the POA. Yeah. It could be a limited one.
It's a very vulnerable decision.
Exactly. It could be a limited one. It could be a healthcare. It could be a durable, which is all encompassing. So it just depends. And I'm not saying that this is right for everyone, but what I'm saying is it definitely deserves some thought and some consideration, because you want to, just because something happens to you does not mean it's permanent. It could just be temporary. And if you have that medical emergency and you have a strained relationship with your mama, and after the medical emergency, because nobody was paying your rent or your credit card bills, you were evicted from your apartment, your credit score tanked, and now you on your mama's couch, how is that going to help you get better? Because you already have a strained relationship with this person. Now you're recovering on their couch with jacked up credit and no place to go because nobody was managing all of that.
Yeah, I think she's seen a lot.
Savaun be illustrating well, though. You be illustrating really good.
Well, the question, because you mentioned again, as a mother, and I know you're a mother of 4 boys, which I don't even know how you're a mother of 4 boys because
and you
I'm a mother of 2 and I'm dying. Well, but whatever.
You all are doing an amazing job. I saw your video about balancing it all. There's no such thing, so I agree.
Yeah.
Oh, you like that, right? Because it's the truth. There's no.
There's no such thing.
The kids are hungry right now.
But let me ask you, if you have children, and let's say, unfortunately, both parents die, there's no estate planning in place. There's no person right. There's no dedicated person to take this child. And maybe parents on both sides have siblings, and now there is a fight over, well, no, my brother would have wanted me to have, the kids, or no, my sister would have wanted me to have the kids. Like, what happens to the children? Do they truly, because there's a thought of,
are they going to go straight to foster?
Right. Will they go to foster care? Is that a thing?
It's absolutely a thing.
Oh, Lord.
And I can't say for sure definitely what would happen in each state, but the document that you need for this is guardianship nominations, where you nominate guardians for your children. And this can be done as a separate document or in your will or in your trust plan. But yes, absolutely. Because if we don't have anything directing the state as to who should take care of your children, then the state assumes responsibility until that is sorted out. So we might have auntie or uncle or whoever who's present, but typically, in general, the state still has to check out this person, these people. Right. Where do your children go in between? Right? They have to do background checks. A judge may have to legally appoint them. And that could be a quick process depending on where you live, or if you live in a very congested area, that could be a long process. So not only are your children enduring the stress and overwhelm of losing 1 or 2 parents, now they in foster care or in somebody's house left vulnerable. And while there are many amazing, dedicated and committed foster parents, we know that's not the case for everybody, because I see the TikToks and videos of people talking about
ID channel.
What happened when they were in somebody's foster care. And so, yes, we can have husband, sister, and wife, sister arguing about who's going to take the kids, but you could have the exact opposite. You could have nobody arguing about who can take the kids. We could have sister whose sister's sister, whose husband now has cancer and she's overwhelmed. So she's like, I don't even have the mental bandwidth to do that anyway. Right. And we could have brother's husband who now has a run-in with the law and is not even eligible anymore. And so now we have nobody who can take the kids. People who you think may step up and take your kids may not actually step up and take your kids. So that's why you need to have those conversations as well. Or they could just have a life circumstance. Sister may get the kids and everything may be fine, and then sister could pass away. Sister's husband may be like, no, thank you. Or you may not want that. You may not. You may not want them. They may be okay if your sister's alive, but if sister's husband dies, you might say, no, we need to move on to number 2 on the list.
Yeah. Look at Nee is stressed right now.
Yeah, you got a license in Jersey?
I don't, but I do have a referral I can send your way.
Because we are flying dolo right now.
Well, Nee and I have been talking about doing estate planning probably for the last like 5 years.
Yes.
We've been talking about doing estate planning. We just haven't done it yet. And the main thing that I want to start with is the guardianship process, right? Because for me, that's my most important, asset, if you will, or the people in my life, and I want to make sure that my children are...
And liability.
Yeah, well, I want to make sure that my children are well taken care of. And if I can keep them out of the foster care system, I'd prefer to do that. But wow, there's so many questions swirling in my head right now. I don't even know
it's
where to start.
How about this? Let's with kids, like with kids. What if the kids are a certain age, right? Like, let's say they are
16.
Yeah, they're still a child.
Not even that.
They're still a child.
Let's say they're like 18, 19.
Okay, well then they're not a child.
Right.
Okay, so what's the best way to describe it then? In terms of trying to bequeath stuff to them.
Yes.
Right? Isn't there like estate taxes? Isn't there
Depending on where
like
you
gifts?
live,
Like,
yes.
isn't that a big deal also? Like if you want to give,
Yes.
something to your kids?
Yes, it is. And I do want to just take a point and say that one, I commend you for even considering getting an estate plan, because 70% of Americans do not have an estate plan. And the number is even higher for Black folks. So because
we're going to talk about that in a second.
Right. There's cultural implications and all kinds of things about talking about dying. But two, when you said you're going to start with guardianship nominations, I encourage you to go ahead and start the plan for yourself and include the guardianship nominations, because as parents, yes, we want to protect everybody, but I compare it to being on the plane. Put the oxygen mask on yourself.
Yeah.
Right. And then you're able to take care of everybody, because you can assign people to your children. But as parents, even when we die, our responsibility is still to make sure that we're paying for them. Just because we give somebody our kids, it's still our job to leave the money to take care of them. So you want to make sure that you do that. And to answer your question about young adults and leaving for young adults and taxes and all of that, I think that if you have younger adult children, trust planning is a better option than just doing a will, because a trust allows you to do what I call put strings on your money. A will will just give.
I like segues. So tell us, what's the difference between a will and a trust then?
Yeah, there's a big difference. A will is a document that's only effective once you pass away. And it distributes who gets what when you pass away. Depending on your will, it will also say who's in charge of managing your estate. And it will also say who can take care of your children, right? In short, you may do other things. But a will cannot say, I'm going to give my children $5,000 when they turn 18, and then another $5,000 when they turn 25, and then the rest when they turn 30, right? Because a will just does a distribution one time. A will cannot hold the money.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
A trust is a document that allows you to put strings on your money. You can use money to pay for education. You can use money to pay for travel. You can use 10% of it to pay for your wedding or to invest in a business. Then when you turn 27, you can get another distribution. And then when you turn 35, you can have access to all of it, right? A trust can do that, but a will cannot do that. A will can also put limitations on how you can access the money. If you're struggling with substance abuse, if you have a criminal record, then the trustee has to manage the money for you until you've been clean for 2 years or 5 years. A trust can also do asset protection depending on what kind of trust you have or what kind of legal terminology that you kind of weave in there. So, for example, people who are in litigious fields, doctors, lawyers, right?
That's what I was going to mention.
Somebody's always mad at us as a lawyer. I mean, everybody's always mad at us. You'd mentioned your parents got an estate plan, right? So depending on the trust, they might have something in there where they've left their assets to you in trust that cannot be attacked by creditors. So because they know you're in a litigious field and we don't want creditors potentially accessing what we leave behind, we're going to say that these assets cannot be used in the event that you get a divorce, to pay any creditors, for bankruptcy. So a trust allows you to put more instructions on what you leave behind. The other benefit of a trust is, in general, if the trust is done properly and the assets are owned by the trust, it avoids the probate process.
Right.
A will does not avoid the probate process. The trustee has access to make decisions over what is in the trust immediately. The land, the homes, the assets, the bank accounts, because it's owned by the trust. It's not owned by the person who passed away. So in short, those are some of the differences between a will and a trust.
Yeah.
So, oh man, I had a good question. Okay, this is the question I had. So doctors, you mentioned that trusts, in essence, protect from creditors. I know this is probably...
It depends, but keep going.
Okay, what about like there's a doc who's been practicing for a certain amount of years, he or she is retiring at 65 and medical malpractice cases and so forth, right? If they develop a trust, is whatever in the trust, is that protected from like a medical malpractice case and so forth?
And so what I would say is in general, no.
Mhm.
Because in the example that I gave, the asset protection was provided by the parents. So the parents created the trust, and it was the parents' asset that they put the asset protection on. Because if it's your asset, a judge can simply say, well, take it out. take it out and pay them in general. So the kind of trust,
Really?
the kind of trust that you are potentially talking about is an irrevocable trust. And those offer some more features, asset protection features, and they offer a little more protection. But that trust is irrevocable. So once it's created, it cannot be changed. And now, in general, you have a third party trustee managing your assets on your behalf. And while I'm a strong proponent of durable power of attorneys, I'm not necessarily a strong proponent of somebody managing my assets when I'm fine and well, and now I can't change it. So I think it just kind of depends. If we are making in the excess of $12 to $15 million a year, then, we need to consider the irrevocable option, because they can be pricey to maintain, because you're paying professionals to manage that, right? That's not just you managing it as compared to the revocable trust. But the revocable trust still has benefits, because you can put those asset protection features on what you leave for your children. You can do that.
See, this is why you need a professional like Savaun.
I mean, there are so many layers to this, right? Because so you mentioned the whole cultural thing, right? So everybody know, don't speak death on me. You just want to speak death on. It's like, oh my God, nobody's trying to kill you.
Yeah.
But I will tell you about a conversation
people will
I had with my parents.
People will avoid talking about this.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you about a conversation that I had with my parents before we went in and did their estate planning. And the discussion was, look, I think you guys need to do estate planning. Well, I don't think we need to do that. I said, well, what are you going to do? Let's talk about your house, right? Your house is your biggest asset. What are you going to do with the house? Well, you kids will. I stopped my mother right there, and I was like, I'm not fighting with my siblings.
And y'all all get along.
Yeah.
Yes. All of us get along.
Yeah.
Right. And
Well.
I even have half siblings, and we all get along very, very well. Yeah. I would like to keep it that way. Yeah. I'd like to keep it that way. So my dad actually was on board, but my mom took a little more coaxing. But eventually we got there. We did it, maybe about 2 years ago now. It's going on 2 years ago. And so we got the irrevocable trust. I guess they call that like the Medicaid or Medicare trust.
Okay, yes.
They did that trust. They're in their 80s.
Yeah.
So I think
it was appropriate.
Yeah. It was appropriate for them. But let's talk about why people feel like they're speaking death on.
Why do people want to avoid this?
Right.
What is it that you see that makes people want to avoid
what is it that
It's uncomfortable. I think talking about planning for death makes people consider all of the things they did not do, they did not achieve, what they had more time to do and to get right. And some people feel like everything has to be perfect before they can do the plan, right? I have to be a millionaire first. I have to have my investment properties or whatever first, and then I'll do the plan. When really it's just the opposite. And it's actually easier to do the plan first, because then you can start buying assets with your trust as opposed to trying to retitle things later. But culturally, I think that it comes from a faith-based perspective that, what you say will be, and there's power, there's life and death in the power of your tongue. So talking about the tongue means something negative. But if we're talking about a faith-based perspective, we also know that Proverbs says that a wise man plans for his children's children, right? There's many verses that say, make a plan, write it down. We know that God takes legacy seriously. He blesses generations upon generations. So he is a firm believer in planning for your legacy and taking care of your own and securing your own. If I was a Bible scholar, I'd rattle off a few more verses because there are.
Take that, Granny. There you go, Granny. Here you go. This is what the Bible says right there.
A wise
like a domino card.
A wise person exactly plans for their children's children. So I think the best way, or my approach, is there's a couple approaches you can do when speaking with your elderly family. And this is all over the diaspora, right? You could be a Black American, you could be an African, you could be Caribbean. It's just a Black folk issue, period.
Yeah.
They don't want to talk about it. But one of my suggestions is talking to whoever the elderly person is, or person who you would like to get an estate plan, and saying, Mom, if there's a medical emergency, who do you want to make the decisions for your care? Right. And they may not want to pick somebody because they may not want to hurt somebody's feelings, or they may feel very strongly about it.
Right.
The other reason, segue, as to why I'm also a proponent for doing your estate plan younger and when you're, of course, of sound mind and able body, is because when you're not of sound mind, we can't do it. Right. I get people who call me because somebody's on their head.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Or someone has dementia.
Yeah. And it's like, I'm talking to them and I'm like, that's not worth my law license. We can't do a plan for this. This person is not of sound mind. They don't have what we would call testamentary capacity. So they cannot do a plan. And another segue, when somebody's ready to do a plan, just because you're ready doesn't mean you're going to find a lawyer who's going to be able to do it or ready to do it at that moment, because they want me to drop everything and all my clients to do bedside planning, which is going to cost extra, because now I'm telling people who are in line, you have to wait. And in fact, I'm really steering away from them. Those are the most complicated and
I would imagine.
Right, I can understand there's a lot of drama involved in that.
Messy situation.
I would imagine.
But the same. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and the cost, right?
Yeah.
Like, they may not be ready to do it. Also, just it's costly, I would imagine.
Yeah, and
so how about this then? What about life insurance? I'm sure that plays a part in all of this. Like, is there like the best type of life insurance to have in these type of situations? Because, I don't know if you know, but doctors, particularly the younger doctors, they get, what's the word I want to use?
Bombarded.
They get bombarded with a lot of whole life policy, life insurances. I don't know if you're aware of that with the residents and docs and even young doctors. A lot of times now they end up selling it and so forth, and they exchange it for term life insurance and so forth. But what type of insurance do you recommend in these type of situations? I know obviously this is edutainment and it all depends and so forth. But in these type of situations, I know with the elderly, you'll see they oftentimes have the insurance that they see on TV, right?
Yeah.
Right. So
Kinda
talk to us about that. Like when someone is thinking about estate planning, what type of insurance should they be thinking that they need to have by the time they pass away, like when in our type of situation?
Sure. So life insurance is like one component of the estate planning wheel. I think it's very important. And I will actually leave the type of insurance to the insurance people, because you'll hear all kinds of rhetoric. So we know that whole life is a policy that typically when you get it, depending on the company, it bills cash value. And it's a type of life insurance policy that the premium is set to the age of whenever you purchased it. So if you purchased it younger, it's better. Whereas when you get older, sometimes it's more expensive. And for older individuals, it's pretty much impossible at that point.
Correct.
A term policy. So regardless of whatever you do for yourself, I encourage you to do that for your children, because their policies are very affordable. I have whole life policies on all of my children because I want to be sad at God forbid, right? I want to be sad and now got paid for it. So, and it's also a gift to them when they become of age. You've been paying it for so long that the deductible is next to nothing by the time they're old enough. And it's now, again, that's generational wealth, because the hope is they survive me, and now I've left them with even a $25,000, $30,000, $50,000 policy or whatever, that when they pass away can provide for their children the lost income. Now, we know that the term policies are policies that you get for a term. So it could be a 10-year term, a 15-year term, a 20-year term, and that's fine. That's fine and dandy. They're more affordable. It's definitely better than nothing. But what happens after that term expires, then you need to get another term, and 10 years have passed, 15 years have passed, health conditions have taken place. And so it may be more complicated. So I'm not a person who's going to say you have to get whole or you have to get term. I think it's very important to have something. To have something. There's some people who may not necessarily need life insurance. If you don't have any children, if you don't have, a spouse, if you're, rich auntie or uncle somewhere and you have enough cash to bury you, to pay for your probate costs and to leave to your nieces and nephews, then you may not necessarily need that extra money.
You're self-insured.
That's what they say, self-insured.
You're self-insured.
Yeah, you may not need that expense. But if you have a spouse who stays at home or a spouse who earns less or even a spouse who earns more, but you don't want their standard of living to change just because you're gone. When you go, the income that you are generating every month also goes
with you.
And you have to supplement that somehow so that your family is not left hanging or in financial constraints.
What happens in a situation where you have a private practice and you have a partner? Like, is that part of estate planning also, or is that just an issue? Yeah. Or is that a situation that occurs that just between you and your partner, y'all handle it?
No.
What happens in that situation?
That is very much a part of your estate plan, especially if your business...
Renee was like, hecky no.
No, I said hecky yeah.
Hecky yeah.
I said hecky yeah.
It is very much, especially if your business planning isn't tight. And for some people, their business planning isn't tight. Their operating agreement doesn't speak to what happens if one of the partners die. Does their interest go to their surviving spouse or go to the surviving partner? Because now what happens is now I own a practice or a business with my partner's husband or wife. Do I want to do that?
I saw Blackish. That's what happened on Blackish.
Oh, really?
What do you mean? What happened?
Yes, that's how Wanda Sykes' character came on Blackish. She won the business in a divorce. Remember? She won a business in a divorce. I always think about that. Yeah.
So business planning is very important because now you could be owning a business again with somebody's spouse, with somebody's child. And you're like, wait a minute, what happens? And they're not going to buy you out and you may not be in a position.
Don't use all this anesthetic. The kid is like, yeah, we trying to save money. Don't use all this anesthetic. What are you talking about? What's he talking about?
So planning for your business, for your professional practice, all of that is very much important with respect to creating a comprehensive estate plan.
So how does that work? So is that something that you have to let your managing partner know, or is that something that happens?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would imagine that would be something that you would kind of talk about in your contractual agreement, because sometimes with the partner as to what happens.
You see generational change. You see generational differences sometimes in members of a private practice, right? Like you may be in practice with someone who's in their late 50s and you just started and you're in your early 30s, right? So you're like, I'm not even thinking about this, but so what I'm saying is that person in their 50s could be working on their estate planning, right? Once they start doing that, do they have to, that estate planning has to incorporate with you also, or like, do they have to pay for you to get covered? Oh, I get confused about that. How that works.
So what I would encourage is, one, make sure all your business documentation is tight. Your operating agreement, your succession agreements, your exit strategy when it's time to create that plan. And then how your interest is going to be divided. That needs to be included in your business planning and then also indicated in your estate plan what's going to happen. Because if you don't have anything in your business planning, now you got the surviving business owner potentially in a legal battle over who owns what you've left behind. Because if you own 50% of a business and there is nothing explaining on the business end what happens to that business, whoever was to inherit your interest now owns 50% of that business, once they go through whatever that process is. So I would say have it very clear in your business documentation, and then also have it very clear in your estate planning documentation. And in many instances, that will require the collaboration of whoever your business attorney is and your estate planning attorney.
Yeah.
And in some instances, that could be the same person. It just depends on what their expertise is.
So does this apply, for example, does this apply only to assets or businesses or whatever in the U.S.? What about international?
Yeah.
So, being, I'm my family's Haitian, his family's West African. We have a property that we just bought in Ghana.
Oh, nice.
What does that mean for us?
That means an attorney who's licensed in Ghana, right? So, because
Savaun,
you're going to need
on.
it. It's true.
Let's take a trip. Come on, let's fly.
It's ready to broaden
your jurisdiction doesn't work in Ghana?
No, it doesn't. But I will tell you, I have. I was in Liberia last year handling estate planning matters. So,
you big time.
It's this is an academic piece I've actually been thinking about, land loss within the diaspora, because what happens to immigrant families when they move here, and what happens to the wealth and everything that they've acquired. Because people gonna move on your land, they're gonna build a house on there.
Yep.
All kinds.
Yep. Or they're gonna tell you we watching your land. We building it. Keep sending money home. You get home, house.
A lot can happen. So here is my suggestion, because this is, in my opinion, a novel concept or issue. When you do your estate plan here, you plan for your property in Ghana. What is it, in Accra? I don't know where it is, but you plan.
Yeah, it's in Accra.
Okay, you plan for your property in West Africa. You include it in your will here into who should get it, who should manage it, who should distribute it, and your power of attorneys again if something happens to you. The laws there are different, because here, I can't speak to Ghana, but I can speak to my experience in Liberia. Here, a power of attorney is not effective once you pass away. Once the person has died, now we're going to what the will said or the trust said. Over there, the power of attorney still gave me leverage even after the person has passed away, having that power of attorney, because it's like, well, if they wanted you to make the decision when they were alive, then they probably still want you to make the decision.
Right. That makes sense.
When you passed away. So it's very nuanced. I can't speak to exactly what's happening in Ghana, but I would say include your plan for it here. And then when you have the time, opportunity, and emotional bandwidth, when you go there, just have a will drawn up there to protect your property and the assets that you have there. Because again, you've spent all this time and energy to build what I'm sure is a beautiful home, and I can't wait to visit it. So let me know. You did that for your family. You did that for a reason. You did that to retire there or whatever the case may be. And so you want to make sure that too is also protected and compliant with the laws in that country.
Yeah.
So Savaun, bring us on home.
Yes.
Like how does someone who's listening to this, how do they find a reputable estate planner, someone who is obviously as excellent as you? How do they do that? What's the first steps?
Okay, well, one, thank you very much. And I would encourage people to talk to about 2 or 3 lawyers, right? Because there are many people who can do the job, but your comfort level matters. Because if you're not comfortable with the person, then you're just going to sit on it and you're not going to do it. Talk to 2 or 3 attorneys. And to your earlier point, it's better to do it sooner than later, because the legal profession is in a state of transition, in my opinion, right? We have legal desert communities, and they're growing, and they're only getting worse, meaning there's only like 1 attorney per 1,000 residents. So it's getting harder to find an attorney and then a lot of attorneys are practicing in specific practice areas. Personal injury or litigation, or people who just don't want to deal with it. They have checked out because they did their 5-10 years and they're like, I'm over it. So I say that to say, you don't know what the legal what your local legal landscape may look like just because now you're ready to create a plan. So I would encourage you to meet with 2 or 3 attorneys who are licensed in your state. Estate planning attorneys, a lot of us operate virtually until it's time to sign your documents. So you may, so it's okay to talk to someone in a further location than you within your state, because you'll just go see them at the very last day, so you can make a trip of it. Talk to 2 or 3 attorneys. Talk to them about your specific needs, because it's not a one plan fits all approach. Your plan should be custom and it should be unique to you. So if you have a blended family, there should be specific considerations with respect to a blended family. I grew up in a blended family, right? But I grew up in a very, what I would consider a very healthy blended family. And because of that healthy dynamic, I am also a landowner in West Africa, right? Because my stepfather is West African. So
I read that. I read that. That you have a third grandmother.
Yes. So I also have my beachfront property, right? Because he took me to secure that and to make sure that I had that, and that I had that in my name and my husband's name. So there's something for my children. So I say that to say that may matter to you. You may want an attorney who looks like you, or you may want an attorney who's the same gender as you, or you may want an attorney who has cultural competencies that are similar to yours, whether they are of that culture or not, or none of that might matter. It might just be who's the cheapest. Whatever the point is, talk to a couple of them and get a good sense of who you think is going to be the person who you will work with, who you will feel comfortable with, and who you can hold them accountable if it's taken like more than 6 months to
Okay. Well, it was a pretty quick process, I think.
Yeah, for each of us, it was pretty quick. To be honest with you, what delayed everything on our end was just me, or family not being able to provide certain documents and stuff. So it was very, very great, or very, very. It went faster than I thought it was going to go.
Yeah, and that happens.
Lastly, I was just going to ask, I know you wanted to bring it all home, but I do have to ask this question because I think it's really important, is where are you keeping the documents so that people know, like, hey, this is a thing, right? There's a power of attorney. There is a guardianship. There is, there is something that is a plan. But if nobody knows that there is even a plan to even look for one, like, how is that happening?
Yes. So again, this is just my opinion for educational purposes. Other attorneys may differ with me, but depending on your age is what you should do with your documents. If you are pretty, this is just my opinion. If you are pretty set, you're not going to be making a lot of changes, go ahead and file them with your courthouse, your local courthouse. Okay. Most local courthouses will file your will. They will file don't file your trust. That's a private document, but they'll file your will, or they'll file your power of attorneys. Your health insurance will keep a copy of your living will or your healthcare power of attorney, depending on what you have, so that it's on file. So it's on file. And it depends, because, if you're going to have a procedure, they'll ask you, like, do you have a health care, whatever, and you can just submit it with that. So if you're not going to make changes, go ahead and file it. So it's there and it's a public document. If you're younger and you might make changes, then you want to keep it in like a fireproof bag, or you want to keep it in your bank safe.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Okay. Right. Fair enough. Fair enough.
What I want to say is also scan it and have an electronic copy. Don't share it. Just tell them where to find it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think on ours also, what was interesting is from my parents, they gave us a section at the end of the binder to put in like logins and passwords, bank accounts and stuff, so that, like you said, if there's an emergency and, the POA is making decisions for them, but there's also a way that they can easily log into accounts and pay the mortgage or pay the electric bill and things like that. So things that you just don't think about. You think about everything high level, but you don't think about like the low-hanging fruit.
Details, like who's paying the mortgage.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Savaun, thank you very much for this. We really appreciate it.
This is so helpful.
If someone is listening right now and they want to get in contact with you, can you tell them how they can get in contact with you?
Sure. So they can email me. It's Savaun@EaserLegal, or I'm on Instagram, The Savvy Mommy, and TikTok, The Savvy Mommy, the very same.
Yeah. That's how I found you.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, your videos are really good. They're really helpful. And when I saw your video about estate planning, one of your many videos about
she kept
estate
talking
planning,
about it.
I was like, we have to have her on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure. Go ahead and talk to your loved ones and your elderly family about creating that comprehensive estate plan. I'm tearing up a little bit because I had something in my throat, but
that's okay. That's how we do it. That's fine.
Right. You just never know, like when that mystical, but anyway,
tickle.
Talk to your loved ones about it. Ask them, who do they want to make those important decisions on their behalf? And say, let's just make it official. We don't want any drama. And I want to make sure that you have someone to advocate for you in the event that you need it.
Yeah.
Boom. There it is.